From Florence, Italy, the city of inspiration for sculptors in ages past and for centuries to come, you're listening to The Sculptor's Funeral. Good day to you all, and welcome once again to another episode of The Sculptor's Funeral, the podcast for figurative sculptors everywhere. I'm your host, Jason Arkles, a sculptor and instructor living and working in Florence, Italy, where all the great sculptors are dead, and I don't feel so well myself. And today, we're going to hear an interview with Sabin Howard, an American sculptor who has just been given the go-ahead for one of the most notable commissions in the United States in the last decade. Last week, the World War I Memorial Commission announced the selection of architect Joe Wiltshire and sculptor Sabin Howard as the winning team for the National World War I Memorial at Pershing Park in Washington, D.C. This National Memorial Park will honor the more than 4 million American men and women who served in uniform and the 116,000 people from the United States who gave their lives in the First World War. Sabin Howard grew up in both the United States and in Italy. His mother is Italian, and he studied art in both countries, earning his MFA at the New York Academy of Art and studying in Rome under Paolo Carosone. I really wanted to interview Sabin Howard because, in my opinion, his being awarded a national public commission of this scale and stature can be seen as a possible milestone in the fortunes of figurative sculpture, at least in the United States. Much like the contemporary gallery and museum culture, the realm of public art has been for decades dominated by conceptual and abstract work, but figurative sculpture in the public realm has had even more of an uphill battle, for reasons which include everything from the politics of displaying the human figure in public to the contrarian academic and market attitudes concerning what public art, which represents the culture at large, should and should not be. I spent about an hour talking with Sabin about not just the commission he's about to start, but also the development of his personal style and ethos in his work. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Well, Sabin Howard, thank you so much for coming on The Sculptor's Funeral. It's just a fantastic pleasure to have you on, and congratulations with this amazing commission of the National World War I Memorial that you received. You received notification just this week, is that correct?
Yeah, thank you also for having me on. It's an honor to be here for you and try to answer some questions. I found out, yes, last Tuesday.
I bet you've had just, what's the last week been like? I can't imagine getting a commission of this sort of magnitude. I don't know what the first step after the news breaking would be.
Well, this is, there have been many memorials done. But in some way, this one is really unique because what happened, and as a fellow sculptor, I think you can really appreciate this. Our team was formed by a 25-year-old architect who's not even licensed, who has tremendous vision. His name is Joe Wiltshire, and he came to me after September, and I had been on a previous team with Michael Imber, who's a classical architect out of San Antonio. And so we didn't make it to the short list, which is five groups. Joe sent me an email, and he'd gone through a bunch of National Sculpture Society artists and had a list, and he'd looked at I'd say over 200 other artists, and I was low on the list because as you scroll down alphabetically, they had reversed my name to Howard Sabin. So I was at the very end of the list, and he told me that as soon as he saw my work, he was like, "That's the guy. That's what I want to do." And so I got this email saying, urging me to join his team, and I was like, "Wow, this is really cool. I'm back in it." And that was last September, and then the last 4 months from September to December, I redesigned everything, coming up with a completely new concept. And the reason I'm answering it this way is because in some way it's extremely unique, because as a sculptor, I designed the sculptural component of the commission. It was not designed by an architect. If an architect had designed the sculptural component, let's just say percentage-wise, my sculpture would have been 15% versus, I don't know, whatever. It's a massive idea. It's one of the biggest figurative projects done in the last, I would say almost 150 years.
In the United States, or yeah.
Globally.
Really? Well,
Yes. Well, you're looking at a relief panel that right now is around 81 feet long.
mm-hmm.
I mean, think 81 feet long, and you're looking at maybe 30 figures across that panel, if not more, because I'm going in to redesign this in the next few months for the reviews, which will come in July. And so that's one part. And then the other part is figure composition in the upper lawn that might be 2 to 3 figures together, and that will be redesigned as well. So do you see what I'm saying? It's like, what architect would have come up with like that much sculpture for one park?
So what you're saying is that Joe Wiltshire, is that his name? Wiltshire?
Yeah.
Joe Wiltshire is an unlicensed architect who was shortlisted for this. He was one of the 5 that actually did make the short list.
That's right.
And he didn't
That's right.
And at that point, he hadn't even gotten a sculptor. Is that right?
No.
Huh. Wow.
He had drawings. The committee said, "Hey, you need to get a sculptor that knows what he's doing."
Right.
There are really not many of us out there.
Yeah, it's true. Wow, that's really cool. I mean, I don't know if it's the biggest in the last 150 years. I can think of a lot in Europe that
figurative.
Yeah,
figurative.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking like the Albert Memorial in London is pretty.
It's
big.
On that scale. Yeah, it's on that scale.
Yeah,
how many years ago was that? 150 years, right?
No. When did that would have been 1880? So, well, yeah, 130, 135.
130 years. Yeah. See? Yeah. That's what you were saying. That's the last stuff that was done at this level, where it's epic sculpture that's representational of epic historical events. And when do you see it after? Okay, let's say 1890s. When do you see something else after that?
In figurative realism, you'd have to go beyond the Iron Curtain to find, definitely.
Yeah. Exactly.
Certainly stuff in Weimar Germany and Nazi Germany.
Right.
And the Soviet Union, but maybe we don't need to talk about that. As good as a lot of that work actually was.
Yeah.
So could you briefly describe, now you mentioned the relief, 81 feet long, you say?
Yeah, right now it's 81 feet long. Right. It might be a little bit less. It might go to 70. There'll be some redesigning in terms of the architecture as well, but the ideas will be the same.
Right.
And then we're looking at a reconfiguration of the composition, because that was the first presentation and it showed what I was capable of. And now we'll start to edit it and just bring it to the next level.
Right. Now, the other components, the other sculptural components of the park are a figure group. I believe it's called the Wheels of Sacrifice. No, I'm sorry, the Wheels of Humanity.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through the allegorical content of that and sort of what that figure group is about?
Well, right now and this is going to change too, because what's going to happen is the relief panel will take on the active element, and the where the Wheels of Humanity is, which is the figurative sculptural composition in the round, will become the contemplative element. Mm-hmm. So what we have right now is there are 3 soldiers around a cannon, and the cannon and the wheels are moving forward, right, and the soldiers are looking backwards. It's done similarly to, in concept, to the Sherman Memorial for the Capitol. Mm-hmm. And that piece is extremely active, dramatic, a full-on Baroque type sculpture.
And then there's going to be a statue of General John J. Pershing. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a piece that was done, I think right after the war.
Ah, so it's a pre-existing figure. It's not something that you were going to sculpt. Ah, okay.
Yeah,
right. Excellent. And then the rest of the monument itself is really a memorial park.
Yeah. It's a park / memorial monument. So two things in one. It has to function on both counts.
Yeah. God, I'm just thinking of 81 feet of relief work. How long do you imagine that's going to take?
There are deadlines for this.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking about right now is having two levels of helpers. And one is an apprentice group, which is a lower level, and then an upper group of 3 to 4 professional sculptors working under me. Right. So you're looking at maybe a team of a total of 10 people. And how long is it going to take? That we have certain dates, but fundraising is in process now, and so all this is contingent on that.
Oh, I see. So this is an unfunded, or not? I shouldn't say unfunded, but it's still
we're at the beginning,
right?
Yeah, because what happened? It's privately funded, so fundraising couldn't really take off until they had a product or a sculptor to show. This is what will be done now. So now it starts in earnest, and that's the story.
Okay, now I'm confused. I thought so. This isn't sponsored by the United States government.
No, it's not. It's privately funded.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what were some of the parameters of the design that you had to work within? I mean, now you've obviously done 2 proposals for the same monument. You did both in each in a different way. The parameters that you were asked to work within, what were they? I mean, obviously cost was probably a factor, but was there a specific criterion that they wanted to see in terms of sculpture?
This is what makes it so unique. It's like I had a lot of free reign on this. We had a budget. The budget was it had to come in between $20 and $25 million
for the entire park.
For the entire park,
yeah.
Right? It really depended on what idea we came up with on our own. The parameters are basically you need to represent this on a level that explains the sacredness and importance of it, and on a global level, but it's representative of the American troops and people that sacrificed their life in this war. So of course you have to do something that's very honorable and uplifting. Okay, so what I'm telling you is we have very vague parameters about what had to happen. Obviously, you had this area. It has to be in the area, and it had to function as a park, and it had to function as a memorial and honor this war. So do you see how vague it is?
Yeah.
You can come up with anything. And then obviously the committee had specific ideas in mind. And I know that the committee wanted to see something sculptural. And at the end of the day, I was basically the only sculptural party among 5.
Really?
Nobody else came up with anything sculptural and traditional. And look, you're doing something in Washington. It's very fitting.
So when you say sculpture, do you mean figurative sculpture or sculpture full stop?
Sculpture full stop. I mean, if you go look at the other 4 applicants, there was photography in light boxes. There was some sculpture, but nobody who was a sculptor had gotten involved. So you just saw digital images.
Wow.
So
I'm just kind of shocked. I'm kind of shocked that you were the only sculptor
at that level. Yeah.
Yeah, at that level to make the wow.
Well, and then the really interesting part is it's like there's this joining of like I don't know energy or whatever in the universe, because it's like a year ago I decided, okay, I want to do something public and I want to do something that makes the figure relational. Mm-hmm. So when I got this, Jason Schubau, who runs Civil Art Society, sent out an email to a bunch of people, and I got the email because I'm a classical sculptor. And as soon as I got it, I was like, wow, this would be interesting to apply for. If nothing else, it would be a way to create an idea, and I could show that to other people. So I had no thought that, okay, this is what might make it to the finals. Of course you think, oh yeah, I'm going to win, but it's like, what are the chances? And then as the thing progressed, and I continued to go to these committee meetings, and I saw what a great group of people I was working with. It just developed into, wow, this is the next thing that I'm supposed to do. And this is actually what I had wanted to do even before the contest came up on my radar.
Right. Do you have any insight as to why there is no National World War I Memorial in Washington, D.C. yet?
I think this is something that started a while back. You have a man who's the head of this centennial organization. He answered it best when he was asked, well, why a World War One memorial? And his answer was, um, people just don't even know about World War One and how much it affected things historically and created the world as it is today.
And
And
that is actually something that you worked into your design of the relief, if I remember.
yeah,
Sort of
yeah,
before the war and after the war.
yes,
Sort of, sort of
yeah,
pre-modernity, at least modernity as we
yeah,
know it,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then the big sort of catalyst for that change.
yeah,
Huh.
yeah,
You know what? I'll tell you what. I find it very interesting, actually, that memorializing World War One waited until after the passing of the 20th century, and that the design was chosen is one that is steeped in figurative sculpture. I think those two things are related.
yes,
You know,
100%,
I mean,
100%.
because just like you
Yeah,
said, I mean, World War One marked a huge cultural shift around the world, and that
yeah,
includes art, of course, and modern art happening at the same time. It's really no coincidence, and it makes sense actually. It's like the world needed a new way for art to honor its war dead, to reflect new ways in which soldiers were fighting and dying, because it was an unprecedented war, and it kind of needed an unprecedented art to memorialize it. So
yeah,
in that respect, I think modern art really did have a place at one point.
yeah,
Um, if you look at England's efforts, and I'm sure you have, to memorialize World War One, what they did, with Sergeant Jagger's,
hmm
um,
the three figures,
yeah,
single
the
solitary figures.
well, no,
Uh,
no, that's the thing. It's not a single solitary figure. It looks like that because they're all backed up against these huge,
the cubes,
a
yeah,
huge base. Yeah, but the whole thing on top of it is a twice life-size howitzer, right?
yeah,
And basically, 99% of the monument is this huge mechanized gun on this sort of cubist sort of plinth, and the
mhm,
figures are just sort of scattered around the base. And it really kind of, I think, for me, really sort of highlights the mechanization of the war in a very
yeah,
succinct way. And
yeah,
then it's funny, only about 100 feet away on the same park, you have another World War One memorial made by Derwent Wood. I don't know if you're familiar with him or the monument, but
hmm
it's a single figure on a pedestal, and it's a nude David, right?
hmm
That tried and true symbol of the small hero fighting off the larger oppressor. And it was done, for World War One, but in an essentially 19th century mode, and
right,
it just didn't ring true
yeah,
for so many people then, and actually now. It just it didn't work the way Jaggers did.
yeah, yeah.
Well, anyway, all this is to say that I think these 2 points are related. The
I think that that's something that's really important here is you want to create a sense of unity. This is not only about like, okay, what happened in World War One, but this is also looking at World War One and then moving forward. How you take something like that and learn from the mistakes that were global at that moment.
Yeah,
The destruction. What element? So I saw this as like a chance to actually create something that is uplifting. I mean, war is not uplifting at all. It's destructive.
right. And I think we needed the distance of us. I mean, there's everyone around now experiences second or the First World War secondhand. No one was there anymore,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so
yeah,
now, finally, as a culture at large, we're able to, I don't want to use the word romanticize, but poeticize the war. We can kind of see it through a bit of a fuzzy lens of history, and we kind of forget the worst of it and remember the best of it, the best of it
yeah,
being the
yeah.
sacrifices made for the sake of a better future. That's what
Right.
idealization is.
Yes. Yeah.
And as horrible as it may sound to some, I think we can once again insert notions of the ideal into a war memorial. We
Yeah.
can use notions of humanity to speak about something that, for the people who lived through it, was unspeakably inhumane.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the more I researched it, it's unreal. It's war is war. I have not been in one, but to read about it and to see it from a historical point of view, the things that I've learned are, wow. I'm kind of don't have words for it because the destructive quality for humanity. I don't think anything of that large of a scope has happened since then. There, the Holocaust, you'd have that in World War II, but well, I don't know the number of people that were killed in World War One. It's an incredibly huge number. 52 million casualties.
52 million. Wow. I want to talk a little bit about your own work as a sculptor, both prior to this commission and, of course, the work that you're doing. We were just talking about notions of the ideal in a war memorial and sort of different ways you can do that. Now, as a sculptor, you are an idealist. I would hesitate to use the word classicist because I think you're fairly eclectic in terms of what you draw from, but all your sources do seem to be influenced by notions of the ideal. Would you
Yeah,
agree
could
with
I
that?
talk to, yeah,
Yeah, I'd love
let me
to.
talk
Yeah, I'd
really
love for you to
about
do that.
the nuts and bolts about the sculptural aspect. Okay. How do I say this nicely? Well, okay, there's somebody I respect tremendously, Jacob Collins,
Mm-hmm.
who created Water Street Atelier.
Yeah.
Off Water Street Atelier, about 20 years ago, I think. You had all these students that came out of there, and all these atelier systems have now been created across the country. Um, Jacob's main interest is, first of all, he's a painter. I'm a sculptor, so that's already puts us in different categories. Jacob's interest is in a French Academy type approach, which deals tremendously with the idea of light on the figure and painting elements. I was educated by Walter Erlbacher and Tony Visco and Harvey Citron back in the early 80s, and then I went to Italy and studied with Paolo Carasoni in Rome for 2 years. And I grew up in Italy because my mother is Italian, and so up till about 3 years of age, I lived in Italy and then every year went back. I didn't start making art till I was 19. Because of my upbringing, and also the fact that I grew up in the 60s in New York City, which was a time when you really thought outside of the box, where there were ideals that were in place that are not existent today. You were really the question was, what is your passion? What do you wish to do with your life? So when I turned 19 and I was really misdirected, I really was not headed anywhere. There came a day that I decided I wanted to go to art school, and I had never drawn before. Well, I ended up in Walter and Martha's class, and I had Tony Visco the following year. And from those people, I got a base in how to make classical sculpture. So the long and the short of this is my sculpture is constructed more upon the principles of assembly of the universe. How are things constructed structurally? And if you look at a figure, there are elements of architecture within it that are seen in the skeleton. And then over that skeleton, you have elements that are more Baroque, which are spirals. Those are the muscular elements and how a muscles spiral through this anatomical architectural structure. Mm-hmm. So you have these two sides. So every art style or time has a balance between how much architecture and how much flesh or energy in spirals. So this is a really interesting thing. Why would a sculptor like me come up now? Why would I get a monument like this now? What's the reason? It's not me. It's like I'm here at this moment, and then there's a reason I was picked. So I think that I transcend this whole concept of figurative and abstract because my work is extremely abstract. When I sculpt, I think about cubes. I think about solids. I think about how shapes move in space and then connect with each other and create movement. So do you see how there's a correlation to the classicism and actually what happened in the early modern artists? That there's a return to a theme that is always there in art, that the artist looks at nature and then he translates it into an art form. My art form is about how the universe is assembled. Does that explain?
I think I think if anyone who hasn't seen your work just heard that, I think they'd actually get a pretty good idea of how you approach the figure.
Yeah.
But now let me ask you, because I looking at the proposal that that you submitted, your winning proposal, and the large frieze.
Mm-hmm.
those look like very, very individualized figures. They're nurses and soldiers and different ranks, and everyone's got a portrait. Now, is this going to be this frieze? Is this going to be an evolution in your style more towards the individualistic, and a little bit away from the more universal aspects of your work? I don't know if you do much portraiture. I don't remember seeing any like portraits on your website. Or are you going to maybe adapt these
Uh,
elements into something a little bit more abstract?
no, I have an answer for that. I don't think things are going to change from the way that I've sculpted in the past. I think that the whole idea of rhythms,
Hmm.
of one arc feeding into another arc and picking it up, um, is very much going to be present. It's like I tied to several different types of thought, because when I'm sculpting, I don't think, okay, this is the way I'm perceiving. I have like 8 or 9 different ways of perceiving things, and then I juggle back and forth through them. One of the ways that I look at things, and if I look at other artists that have done a great job at this, like Raphael,
Hmm.
um, the neoclassicists like Canova. Okay, you have a very harmonious rhythm that carries through the figures, where there's um, I call it almost like a feminine form, because what happens is the outline becomes more important than the actual internal uh, compression of parts. That's more of a Michelangelo thing, where the body is subdivided into all these sections that are pressed down by gravity. Raphael and Canova are more uplifting, because the curves are um, the most important element to the figures creating a harmonious, almost otherworldly idea of who we are as human beings. So that's one way that I think, okay, with curve to curve. Then another way that I think, which is more like Michelangelo, is about the actual structure or architecture of how the body is assembled and how things fit together. This is more of a constructivist approach to the body. It's an organic architecture.
Right.
So that's still going to be there. On top of that, look, we live in modern times. We have this type of hyperrealism in our mind because of the photograph and videos and TV. So our idea of what looks real is really different than what people thought looked real back in the 1500s. So with the use of photography to do things, for example, using references of models and real people, you're going to get a quality that harkens back then to Roman sculpture, that is individualistic, but it's an elevated individual. It's not portraiture done um, on a realistic level. It's portraiture done so it looks like that person, but it's elevated into a higher status of consciousness because of how it's designed.
Almost like some Roman portraiture would be a good example. Also maybe 1830s late neoclassicism,
Yes,
early romanticism,
exactly.
the
The
Lorenzo
Canova.
Bartolini, yeah, Canova.
Bartolini. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. That's what you're going to see. But
Oh,
that's not any
very
different than what
interesting.
I've been doing.
Well, it is in the sense that you're going to have to like add in uniforms and
Yeah, yeah,
it's gonna be I
yes,
think quite a departure from the stuff that I've seen you do so
yeah, yeah.
far.
I haven't shown drapery. I've only shown that in drawings. Yeah, that's a departure. Yeah, absolutely. But the way that I would design the drapery would be very much using the whole concept of rhythms and movement. For example, like drapery takes on a very similar quality to muscles, where you have a point, an origin, and then from that origin or point, you have this kind of like spiral that moves out from that force point,
Hmm.
like a fan system almost, or a shell system, where all um, these sections or flutes of the drapery go to that individual point. That's realism, but it's also translated through a system of form. So that's how I'm saying, okay, what I've done with the figure is
Hmm.
now you're going to see that in drapery. The way that I think and assemble and look and translate from real world into art. That's not going to change. It's just going to evolve.
Are you going to sculpt the especially the frieze? I'm thinking about the frieze. Are you going to sculpt that full size, in clay or modeling material?
Plastilina. Yeah,
Plastilina.
plastilina.
Yep.
I think the best thing to do is to really get that laid out um, with a photo. So you have a photo that lays it all out,
Hmm.
and then I would take that and I would project it onto the board and put the clay up. It's flat relief, so we would draw it out
Hmm.
with a projector and then move things around. But you want to get the composition nailed down. I don't think I'm going to have the time to make a maquette, um, and so that's why I'm thinking the photograph. And then if there was time to do a drawing, the
Right.
drawing would be a good way to kind of like get it and then project it up there, and then that would get the composition correct. And then you got depth on it as well, so I'd have to deal with the background to the foreground issues.
Right. Right. Wow.
It's it's a very cool project, and um, you got to be a quick study because it's like everything is always um, problem solve. It's a
Yeah.
Sistine Chapel of the sculpture world today. I mean, 81 feet long and 10.5 feet high, and you're looking at 7 foot figures, some 8 foot figures, and probably up to 40 figures. And plus horses, plus artillery, plus trees, plus vegetation, plus ground plane.
We'll be back with more of my interview with sculptor Sabin Howard when the sculptor's funeral continues. Happy February, everyone. I know that the summer still seems like it's not going to be here for a long, long time, but you're actually wrong. It will be here before we all know it, which is why now is the time to start planning for the Wiltshire Workshop 2016. Last summer I conducted a 2-week workshop in the stunning English countryside, not far from Stonehenge, and we all had such a good time that I'm going to do it again this summer. So join me in a 2-week class for beginning and intermediate marble carvers in the green countryside of Wiltshire, just outside of Marlborough, where you'll learn everything you need to know in order to carve a figurative work in marble. In addition to learning the basics with hand tools and machine tools, you will learn the process of using a macchinetta a punto, or pointing machine, the device which enables sculptors to make exact copies of plaster casts in marble. And that's just what you'll do. You'll choose from a selection of plaster casts taken from the work of master sculptors of the past, Bernini, Houdon, Michelangelo, and more, and you will create your very own true and faithful copy to keep. Not many people can claim to own their own mask of Bernini's St. Teresa, or Michelangelo's Dying Captive in Carrara marble, and even fewer have made that copy themselves. But you can be one of them. And the workshop isn't just for sculptors with experience. Even complete beginners and non-sculptors can create a marble work in just 2 weeks. We proved that last year. All the information for the Wiltshire Workshop, which starts August 8th, 2016, can be found at our website, thesculptorsfuneral.com. Now, there's places for just 12 on this workshop, and the sign-up deadline is June 1st. But I've already signed up some people, and I expect the class to fill early this year. So sign up today at thesculptorsfuneral.com or contact me personally for more details. The Wiltshire Workshop 2016. Follow in the footsteps of the old masters and become one of the few figurative marble sculptors out there. Check it all out at thesculptorsfuneral.com, and I'll see you in Wiltshire. I'm back with my conversation with sculptor Sabin Howard, talking about his newly awarded commission for the National World War I Memorial in Pershing Park, Washington, D.C. And I asked him about the differences between a commission of this size and the types of commissions that are more familiar to most sculptors. Continuing my interview, I wanted to know more about his artistic influences and training, especially the influences which led him to pursue the path towards idealism in his work. In his earlier work, Sabin Howard has explored the characters of Greek myth, work for which he's probably best known.
Doing this memorial has been a real eye opener because I've entered into the Washington political system. It's a process. Let's put it that way. And what I was saying before in terms of like having to like really take care of my own mind to deal with the political aspects of it. With experience, you get a commission, right? Let's say you get a commission, and then it's like somebody says, okay, let's sit down next Monday at 9 o'clock and you sit down with me and we'll figure out the terms. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So you go there and you say, all right, I need 185,000 to make the sculpture, and these are my casting costs, and this is my um, mold costs, and I can deliver this piece in X amount of months or years, and installation is this, and here's my figure, 285. Thing. Okay, just give me an example.
Yeah.
Okay, take that and now multiply that by 1,000.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm going to Washington, and it's like, this is my contract. I need to hire this many people, 10 people. This is what my payout needs to be. This is this is the new studio I need to put it in. This is the new design that I need to do. This is what this new design needs to include. And you can't walk into a room and just say, hey guys, this is what we're doing. There's a lot of politics, and so it's a very slow moving vehicle because there's so many parts to it. And then once hopefully all the parts get assembled and are all together, then it starts to happen a little bit more smoothly.
Did you have any help putting together your budget proposal for such an ambitious design? Because I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, it's a fairly unprecedented sort of thing.
Yeah, I went to my accountant who does my taxes, who's known me for 12 years. And we sat down and went over my family budget. We went over like what I know people would like to get paid if they were working under me,
Mm-hmm.
and what the cost of a studio is in New York City, and what my mold maker costs would be, and what my foundry costs would be, and my transport costs, and all these other incidentals. And if you have like 3 people under you and they're gathering a paycheck every 2 weeks and they're working under you, you got to get your ducks in a row. And I need to educate who I'm working with in Washington about my process too, because this is news to them too, and they need to educate me about their process because I'm working now in Washington. Mm-hmm. So it's not as simple as doing a single figure where you just a private sector where you sit down with one man and you say, okay, this is my payout, this is my delivery dates. It gets more complex than that. And I have to go in front of all these agencies too, a government service agency, the park agency, the fine art committee agency. Mm-hmm. We have to pass all these I guess protocols because it's on federal land. You spend a week and there are mornings so I wake up and I just want to put a gun to my head or run to the airport and get on a plane to Mexico. So why am I doing this? Because I want to be in the arena and be seen. And if I continued to make art for the private collectors that I know, nothing would happen or it would be slow. But this way I can do something that has a much, much bigger impact on all these different levels that we've just talked about, like the art world level, the education level. I think most lunchbox Joes, the guys that go to work on the subway from Queens to New York, those guys, they're not interested in art, and there's a big reason because most art is really crap these days. But if that guy on the subway comes into my studio, like for example, the FedEx delivery guy or the UPS guy or the fire department, they all come in my studio, and the first thing that comes out of their mouth is like, "Holy shit!" That's what they say because they get it right away. You don't need a book to understand it or have it explained to you. And so I feel like I got another 25 years, and I wanted to do something that would change the way things are going. And I'm not going to do that in the gallery system because it just doesn't have a broad enough reach. I'm not going to break that system. So I went out of the system and I moved into this system. So I leapfrog.
I don't know the past tense of leapfrog.
Right.
Leapfrog?
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense. I leapfrogged over this whole system, and now the visibility went up. And I just thought it was a better way to like get my point across. Yeah. And I spend a good hour a day doing yoga or biking. I get on the bike to get back and forth to the studio so I can blow off some steam. Because if you don't, you're going to build up some toxic stuff in your body. It's not like this stuff gets really complex. It's not easy. It's really not easy. And it's so congratulations, Sabin. I hear that a lot. It's like, thank you. And it's like, I'm happy about it. Yeah, I am. But it's I see the full responsibility of what has been put on my plate here.
So what's the next step? What's your immediate next move in terms of the commission?
All right, I got to redesign the whole thing. We're starting.
Oh, just that.
Yeah, I got to start at zero. We're starting at zero. Next month we go in for a meeting to discuss like the revision, and I'm totally game with this because I think it should be. That was my first attempt at it, and by the time I was 3/4 through that first attempt, I was like, well, I wish I had done this.
Right.
So we're going to address some of those. Yeah, I get a chance. I get a redo, which is great. And I have to have that redo because this is going to metal or bronze, and it's not going to be something that's up there for just 3 months for a show. This is it. So you got to nail it. Right. And so we're going to have a group meeting, and I'm going to interact with them and get some feedback from them, and I'm going to bring my 30 years of experience to the table, and then we're going to set off on this new adventure of redesign. And I have to get this next 4 to 5 months funded. And I don't know where that funding's coming from yet. I'm going to be doing some of that actively, searching for that funding to make it happen, because time is of the essence here. Like you can't just do this in a month or 2 weeks. No. It's going to take me a lot of frustration. And that's the way that I work, where I will do something and I'll be very frustrated with it. I step away and then I figure out how to problem solve it. So all the issues around the design are also there in terms of how we move this into me being in the studio. How do we make that happen financially? That's the next step.
Now you mentioned Canova, and you mentioned Raphael, which is really interesting. Who else do you look at historically? Who are your favorites? Who are your inspirations?
That's a great question. You pitched me the biggest softball ever, right?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Knock it out of the park.
Thank you. There are two parts. It's like I look at the art and I also look at models really carefully. Mm-hmm. So real people are the base of where it starts in the studio, right? Mm-hmm. So then you're looking at a way to change how somebody looks and put it into an art context. So, like I said before, it's like there are like a lot of different ways of perceiving the model when you're working with a model. So it's all right. If I run down the list, okay, I see it as 3 different sectors. Okay, we talked about the rhythm with Canova and Raphael. We talked about the structure, which is the skeleton and the muscles. That's the Michelangelo type way of assembling the body into solids. Mm-hmm. And then the third element that I have not talked about is Leonardo, which to me is about light and how light falls on the figure and drapery and the universe. And so why am I bringing up the idea of light? Because light does not, I was going to say, sorry, sculpture does not exist without light. So I look at Leonardo because it's how you turn the form away from the light. And one of the things in my education is that there was a really strong emphasis on drawing. Mm-hmm. And I do not see a separation between drawing and sculpture. I think that's unusual in some ways. I see sculpture as a 3-dimensional form of drawing. And so when I sculpt, I think extremely planarly, and in a drawing, certain principles of unification, such as all planes that face perpendicular to the light source are your brightest brights, and all planes that face the same direction are of equal value. And the closer that you move to the light source, the brighter those planes are that are perpendicular to the light. So I take those concepts, and when I go to the studio and I compose a figure, I specifically think about what directions are the planes facing. I'm always thinking about having a top lighting. The light comes from above because the sun is above.
Mhm.
So if the planes are facing, and this becomes really important in a relief because it's a drawing done three-dimensionally. You're pitching the planes specifically in the direction that you want their value to be.
Mhm.
So I will manipulate what the focal point is for a viewer when he comes, and I will also manipulate the increase in drama in terms of where do you make your brightest contrasts. And you design, would you see what I'm saying? You
Yeah,
design
totally.
the figure completely in relation to, okay, I want this head to pop off of the background. How am I going to increase the contrast around this head so that it's super bright and around it it's super dark? And so this is manipulation of planes that is based upon a grammar of anatomy and composition, gestures, and morphology. So that's the scientific element. So there are three different ways of perceiving, and those three different ways of perceiving come from my I guess three favorite groups in terms of art, which is like the classical, neoclassical, Canova, Raphael, the anatomical, Renaissance, structural, and I also see a correlation to the Greeks with Michelangelo and Roman art, which
Certainly,
is,
yeah.
yeah, that's the second group. And the third group is Leonardo, which is tremendously about, for me at least, the scientific approach to light and how the universe is illuminated through light.
Looking at your work that you've done in the past, you do a lot of sculpture, or have done a lot of sculpture with overtly classical themes. And when I say classical, I mean Greek classical themes: Apollo, Hermes, Aphrodite. Um, what what draws you to? It's fairly obvious what draws you to classicism in general, but to explicitly classical myth. Do you have a particular interest in Greek myth? Or
Um, yeah, what's something that's universal? I'm not like, oh, okay, trying to do something archaeological, first of all.
right,
It's,
actually, that's a quote I remember from your website. You have a quote that says, "My art is not archaeological. It's about this moment now and how I live
yeah,
my life in these times." And that's actually the next point I was going to bring up. I was actually going to read that quote to you because I totally understand what you were starting to say about the universal, but it's not like anyone really learns those myths anymore. So
no,
I'm gue- I'm
it's
guessing,
old school.
yeah.
No,
So what would you say to convince a skeptic that these are still relevant?
we created our own. You have pop culture mythology today
Yeah,
with Batman, Superman, the Avengers, the superheroes.
yeah.
That's just like pop culture, and then all the stuff you see on stage has a mythological quality in terms of rock bands like Metallica. So there's this real like it's a part of us, like something bigger than us to create heroes.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree, and actually, that's a theme that I'm working in the work that I'm doing myself right now. Um, but I gave a lot of thought to the Greek myths and to other sort of versions of the monomyth, if you're familiar with Joseph
Yeah,
Campbell's work.
yeah.
And that's a huge influence for me right
That's
now.
such a great point, Jason, that you just made. Go ahead and talk about that. But explain about, I mean, I'm sorry to interview you, but
No, that's all right.
it's a
Um,
fantastic point that you're making about Joseph Campbell, because Joseph Campbell says we have a certain life that is not only ours. There are millions and millions of human beings that have preceded us, and there is a higher way of going through that period, thinking about belonging to something bigger than just ourselves. So that's my take on it. But
Right, right. And I should probably do a whole podcast on Joseph Campbell someday. But my point is that you're right. We do create myths, again and again, and we create our new heroes. So what has led you to go back to the old gods, if
okay,
as it were?
all right. Um, like I said, I grew up in Italy and New York.
Yeah.
So when I was a little, really little, like 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I would go around to like all these piazzas and churches, and you're looking at it and you're looking at these things that are, you know how things looked even bigger when you were a child?
Yeah.
I didn't forget that. I didn't forget the feeling that I had inside when I looked at things. And I think as an adult, I can say now what was going on in my head when I was a little kid. It made me feel like I belonged to something bigger than myself. And I think that is really important. It's not a modern concept. Modern concept is you live, you have your existence, and then you die and you're gone. If you look at other ways of how do you deal with your mortality, that mortality deals with belonging to something bigger than yourself. There is a reason for your existence. And as I've become older as a human being, I've begun to realize that I'm not here just for myself. I'm not here to be in the studio just to make art in my studio by myself and not have a connection with society. And I think one of the really big problems for artists these days is they're not integrated into society on a number of levels. One of them is that we're not making art that is in service of society. And there's a back door to that. If you're in service of society, you are being paid to work for others. You are respected because you are bringing a vision of what can be to many people, and you're uplifting people. You're delivering a message. So I've always looked for how can I make something that connects with other people, but it's still like unique to my own like experience as a person today. And so that's why the mythology thing was interesting in the beginning. It's like, I'm not going to return back and go and do myths. I'm going to do public works now. That's the next thing.
It was more of a time of self-exploration.
You know what? I won't even take it one step back. It's a time of education. I was learning. I'm 52 now. It took me whatever. I started when I was 19 and I stopped doing the mythology thing maybe the last 2 years. It's like I had to learn how to do it. So I learned how to, it's like each part of my career has been, I take on a specific interest and then I learn how to do it. And then, okay, that's enough. Now let's take that and apply it to the next step. The next step is making something that serves even more. And public works is the next step. And we're not talking about, Greek mythology at this point, but that all feeds into like what the World War I memorial is. It's showing human beings and figures in a better than just regular Joe type guy in a uniform. I'm not going to make these guys look sloppy, you know. You're going to do something that's elevating. And when people come to it, they're going to walk away from that memorial and say, I had a visual experience of what World War I was like. It's got to explain. And it's a sense of like, you see all these figures on the relief and they're interconnected. They're unified. They're in communication with each other. They're relational. So they're belonging to something bigger than themselves. You look at the art and it's cathartic. It makes the viewer have the same sort of feelings of connection and unity. And that's the reason that I started with the myths, and that's why I'm feeding into this next.
It's interesting. It seems as though this commission has come along for you right at the right time.
That's what I said.
You're
Yeah.
about to, entering into a new phase and moving on. It's going to be very interesting to see how this monument turns out.
Well, we really got screwed over the last 100 years with the art in this world. It's like you've got crap going on right now that it's really important to like make public that there is another option. The option is that you're looking at work that is very monetarily valuable because of a system that created it. That said this is worth a lot.
You're talking about the art market, the blue chip art market. Yeah.
Yes, and so there's 60 to 70 artists that are promoted by a gallery system, and they want to make sure that because they're selling that art, they want to make sure that they're the gatekeepers. And Peter Trippi has talked a lot about this. It's called the toxic art market. Peter Trippi is the editor for Fine Art Connoisseur. Right. And so this is why did I sign up for this memorial? Because I wanted to change things. I didn't want to just be in the studio making figurative art. I have a greater vision of what can be historically. And So I'm trying to, I'm not trying, I'm going to reverse the direction that figurative art goes. And I started doing webinars this year because I wanted to reach out to people and show them that there was a different way of doing it.
But did you say you wanted to reverse the way in which figurative art goes? Or just art? Really?
Yes, yes, because and it goes back to the idea of figurative art is it's not valued.
Ah, okay. You mean
How it's seen. Yeah,
the impression or the reception of figurative art. You don't want to change how figure art is being done.
yeah, it's status. Well, also a little bit, also because I think I do want to change the way figurative art is being done. I think it needs to be elevated to a higher level artistically. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of that has to do with like um, really great figurative art that doesn't just mimic reality, it translates reality. And that's why there's a connection here to modern art. Um, and modernists, I'm talking about the guys that came right after World War One.
Right, capital M modernism. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a translation into an abstract system. And I don't think people are aware of that, even in a lot of these ateliers, because there's a lot of copying of how light falls on the body without thinking or deducing what's going on. I'm not trying to like make everybody is doing this. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it could be elevated to a higher level of understanding of how the body is abstracted and constructed into parts. That's all. But can I add one thing to that?
Of course.
Um, sorry to be, I hope I'm not didactic in saying this, but it's
Listen, yeah, no, I'm doing this interview for people to hear you, not me. Talk all you want.
okay. Thank you, Jason. There's something really sad here for me. It's like I went to Philadelphia College of Art. It's 1982 to 1985. I got a really good education from the Earl Bachers and Tony Visco and Harvey Citron and Stephen Weiss. And then I went to Rome. Okay, but that foundation back then, I had to learn how to draw. There were teachers that could teach me. Now, I went into sophomore year and I had 25 hours of instructed time with these world-class teachers. I got a great education. So, okay, let's say you're a kid today, you're 20 years old. You want to go to an art school. It's kind of tragic. You have to pay $50,000 a year, and then you want to learn how to draw the figure. It doesn't exist. It's not in their program anymore.
Hmm.
What do? You got to go to an atelier system. You got to go to a place like Florence Academy or Jacobs School, the Water Street Atelier, Grand Central, or one of the other ateliers. It's really a shame. It's taken out of the educational system. What's wrong that people don't realize how important drawing is to the creation of art? And you can't turn to technology to replace what a pencil and hand can do because there's a connection, a hand to brain connection, where your hand moves as your brain sees and translates. You can't do that on a computer. And you're not only seeing this in fine arts, you're seeing it also in architecture and all these other places. Now, this year, I'm going to launch a book called Drawing the Foundation of Art, which talks about that. Doing the monument for me was a way to get a platform also and talk about why this is so important.
Well, it's time once again for a word of support for the sponsor which supports the podcast, Blick Art Supplies, the largest and oldest provider of art supplies in the United States, who ship their quality wares around the world. Their superior customer service, extensive selection, and competitive prices make them the choice for professional and amateur artists alike, and art educators, architects, designers, students, and hobbyists. Virtually anyone requiring quality art materials for work or for pleasure. And seriously, there isn't another art supplier on the web with as many supplies and materials specifically for sculptors than Blick. It's really huge. Over 70,000 products for artists of all types. You can get everything you need from dozens of different clays and plasters to fine Italian marble carving tools, clay modeling tools, specialty casting mediums, waxes, body casting supplies, turntables, armatures, books on sculpture. Basically, if you need it for sculpture, they got it. And shipping is free in the United States on most items if your order is for more than $100. But Blick is not merely a place to buy stuff. They have product information specialists trained to hunt down answers to your tough questions regarding materials, techniques, and safety. Hundreds of how-to videos are also available on dickblick.com or on their YouTube channel, including video lesson plans for teachers and product demonstrations. So that's Blick Art Supplies, but let me tell you how the Sculptor's Funeral fits in. You see, by buying your art supplies from Blick, you can contribute directly to the support of the Sculptor's Funeral podcast. And all you need to do is this. You go to the podcast website, thesculptorsfuneral.com, and you click on any of the banner links you'll see there for Blick. That link will take you right to the Blick website where you can buy whatever you need. It's that simple. Just remember that you need to click through a link at thesculptorsfuneral.com first, so that Blick knows I sent you. Then what happens is Blick gives the Sculptor's Funeral a small percentage from your total bill. It's like you get a discount and then you sort of donate that discount in support of the show. You're going to pay what you would pay normally, but by using the link at thesculptorsfuneral.com, a little something trickles down to the podcast. So the next time you stock up on armature wire, mold rubber, modeling tools, and plastilina, do it in a way that supports the only podcast out there devoted to the global community of figurative sculptors. Go to thesculptorsfuneral.com, click on Blick, and support the show. And thank you. Concluding my interview with Sabin Howard, I ask him a question I imagine many sculptors listening would want to know the answer to. What does it take for a figurative sculptor to land a public commission like this? What is the process, and where does one start? The answer Sabin gave me wasn't the one I thought I'd hear, but it was unexpectedly insightful, considering the banality of the question. And the thing about figurative art these days, and the resurgence of figurative art generally that we've seen over the last couple decades, is that there's a huge component that's missing, and that is public figurative sculpture. And that has traditionally always been the way that the non-art loving public, people who don't go out to specifically seek out art, that's how they encounter it. And it's through that first encounter that gets people into the galleries and into the museums. And it's a huge component that isn't a part of it as much as it used to be. It is coming back a little bit. I mean, I think your commission is actually part of a larger trend that probably started all the way back with the outcry around Maya Lin's Vietnam Memorial. People saying, "Oh, there's no figurative sculpture on there," and of course, eventually a component was added. And then, of course, just in 2011, the Martin Luther King, Colossus on the National Mall. But it's kind of a catch-22. If you're a sculptor with no experience in public monuments, how do you get a public monument? How do you apply for these things? What does a winning proposal even look like? Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and what you've learned in applying for these commissions?
Yeah. I haven't taken the regular path for anything. I've never applied for a monument ever in my whole life. This is the first time I ever did it.
Wow. Beginner's luck.
Yeah, it's not.
No,
yeah,
I
but
know.
luck,
I'm teasing.
luck is no, but luck is it's good you said that, because luck is made. Okay,
Yeah.
you make your percentage. I mean, of having success. You're as an artist. We're not like the rest of the guys. Okay, we're living outside the box, and a lot of us are living underneath the radar. I'm trying to give some advice to people that want to make a living as an artist and a figurative artist. And there are a couple points here. You really have to do a lot of self-promotion. You need to have a website that really looks good, and you also have to have a blog, and you also have to get involved with magazines, get press, and be on radio shows, and it's so much of getting your name out there. But this is nothing unless you have the product, and your art is the product. So your integrity is so crucial for your success. And this is a really difficult thing for most people, because you have to play two sides of the game here. You have to be a really good artist. You have to be a really enlightened human being. You have to, I'm saying, strive for higher consciousness. You can't go get wasted every Saturday night and be smoking pot in the morning and cruising. It's just not going to happen, because at the end of the day, you're going to be looked at when you're trying to present yourself as somebody that can pull a job off, and you have to show that integrity that has to be completely and honestly truthful. So you see what I'm saying? You have to work on yourself as a human being. You have to work on your art craft. You have to work on your physical nature. You have to work on your PR nature. There are all these elements. So it's an evolution, and it doesn't come like being like super fast. Because what we're doing as figurative artists, it's not one of those crafts that you learn in 10,000 hours. That's bullshit. It takes a lot more than that. It takes like 15 to 20 years to get really good. And you need a support system, a financial support system to be able to be in the studio. You don't just go out and apply for stuff. You got to like sit down with yourself, and you got to like kind of figure out, okay, what do I need to work on here? And how do I do this in a practical way? Like, how do I get the time in the studio, which is how do I earn a living so I can be in the studio and do my art? And then that art's going to take over and it's going to cover my expenses. Right. So you can't avoid it, because that's the name of the game is, time equals money. And your education is a lot of time. So you got to be wise about like where you go to school, what teachers you study with, and how you practice and get better at making the art. And I keep coming back to the same thing. Your art is the first thing. It's getting to a level where your stuff really is phenomenal. And then the next part of that formula is getting it in front of the right people, getting the patrons, getting the relation between people that want to see you go forward and want to own what you're making. And so there is no formula like apply for all these commissions and you'll get them. No, that's not it. It's about getting a portfolio together and getting your finances together so that you can do that and go to the next step. And do you see then how that interrelates with like getting your head together so that you can pull this all off?
Sure. No, I'm was specifically thinking about sculptors out there who have already actually achieved to a very large extent exactly what you're talking about. Put in the 15 to 20 years and have financial viability and have the talent and have the vision. What I'm interested in is how does a sculptor who starting with that base,
Mm-hmm.
what is in a practical sense the way to go about looking for these commissions? Are there, I mean, in a very sort of real world terms, I mean, are there websites
practical,
that
real, it always goes back to real terms. Okay. It's not on the internet. It's more the relationship between, other people. So I didn't get to the World War One memorial, by just see, if I had gotten that email from Justin Schubau saying, hey, apply for the World War One memorial this year, I would have been like, 3 years ago, man, I don't want to bother with that. That sounds like a royal pain in the ass. But because Frank Gehry had called me to work on the Eisenhower Memorial, it put the bug in my ear. And why did Frank Gehry call me? Because somebody at the Institute of Classical Art and Architecture had given him my name. And why did that happen? Because I had done my own show in Chelsea, and he had stopped by and seen it. So what I'm saying is, you don't know what's going on outside of your realm or your radar. So there's not like a really clear thing. Okay, where do you go on the internet and apply for commissions? No, it's not that. That's not it. The thing to do is to continually build relationships with people and do shows and get out there with your website, your blog talk, your radio interviews. You get your name out there. You start your own school. You run your own classes. And what's going to happen is you're going to start to build a network of people that know your name and invest in you. And then from there, then you're going to get greater and greater just strength in connection. And that's where it comes. See, I'm not saying it comes from the internet so much. It comes from relationships with individual people. Because then what you can do is you can actually create your own commission with somebody. You can say to one of your clients, I'd love to make this piece. How do we go about making this piece in a public place? So what I'm saying is don't go the usual route. You need to be a creative thinker in how you pull things off.
Right. Well, there is no usual route, of course.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Sabin Howard, thank you so much for talking with me today. This has been a fantastic pleasure.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I really hope that I can help and inspire some people. And actually, you asking me these questions it makes me feel really good that I can share it with others. So thank you, Jason.
Well, I want to thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to Sabin Howard for the interview. And I'm sure we all wish him the best with the monumental task in front of him. Now, don't forget you can check out additional content at the Sculptor's Funeral YouTube channel or on our Facebook group page. And while you're on Facebook, you can join in the conversation at the group page. You can ask a question, leave a comment about the podcast or about sculpture in general, post current events, and more. You can also subscribe to the podcast at Stitcher Mobile or on iTunes, or subscribe from any service from which you get your podcasts and receive the podcast automatically on your PC, tablet, or mobile device each week. And if you want to help the podcast reach other people like you, leave a review of the podcast or give the podcast a rating on iTunes or wherever you subscribe. Check out the sculptorsfuneral.com website where you can stream the complete archives of the show, and that's also where you're going to find the image galleries for this and every episode. While you're there, you might as well click on the sponsor of the podcast, Blick Art Supplies. Clicking on the link and buying from Blick helps to support the Sculptor's Funeral, and for that, I thank you. Thanks again for listening, and have a productive week.